Last meals, a tradition as old as capital punishment itself. But what did these notorious criminals request as their final indulgence? This age-old custom, which varies from nation to nation, institution to institution, has always been a subject of curiosity and often a topic of debate. From the extravagant to the humble, these final meals provide a fascinating glimpse into the lives and minds of those who found themselves on death row. Some requested feast-like spreads, others chose simple comfort foods, while a few decided to make a statement with their choices. Today, we delve into the top 10 most notable last meals on death row. We'll explore the stories behind these requests, the crimes that led to these sentences, and the humanity that exists even in the darkest corners. So, let's embark on this unusual journey, exploring the final culinary desires of some infamous inmates. The countdown begins now. At number 10, we have Ronnie Lee Gardner. A notorious criminal, Gardner spent the majority of his life behind bars. His crimes were heinous, resulting in 2 counts of murder, among other felonies. But let's turn our focus to a more peculiar aspect of his story, his last meal. Before facing his fate in 2010, Gardner made a request for his final meal that was nothing short of luxurious. His choice was a delectable steak, a succulent lobster tail, followed by a classic slice of apple pie. To accompany this, he requested a scoop of vanilla ice cream with a 7-Up to wash it all down. This combination, while seemingly ordinary for many, was his chosen feast before meeting his end. It was a meal that highlighted a stark contrast between the grim reality of his impending doom and the simple pleasures of life, a feast fit for a king as his final meal. Next up, at number 9, is Alan Lee Tiny Davis. This man was anything but tiny, standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing in at over 300 pounds. Davis was convicted for the brutal murders of a pregnant woman and her 2 young daughters in Florida. His last meal was a feast fit for a king, or in this case, a condemned man. Davis requested lobster tail, fried potatoes, and half a pound of fried shrimp. But he didn't stop there. He also ordered 6 ounces of fried clams, half a loaf of garlic bread, and to wash it all down, a whopping 32 ounces of A&W root beer. One could argue that Davis certainly made the most of his last meal, a hearty meal to bid his final goodbye. Coming in at number 8, we have Gary Gilmore. Gilmore, whose life was fraught with petty crimes and incarceration, made headlines in 1976 when he committed 2 cold-blooded murders in Utah. His case gained notoriety, not just for his crimes, but also for his insistence on being executed, a wish granted in January 1977. Now let's talk about his last meal. Gilmore's request was a far cry from extravagance. His last meal was as simple as it gets, a stark contrast to the complexity of his life and crimes. He asked for a hamburger, eggs, potatoes, and coffee. No fancy trimmings, no extravagant delicacies, just everyday food items that one might enjoy on any given morning. It seems that in his final hours, Gilmore sought comfort in the familiar, the normalcy, a semblance of the ordinary life that he had so drastically veered away from, a simple yet fulfilling last meal. At number 7, we have Teresa Lewis, a tragic figure whose life spiraled into a web of crime and deceit. Born in Virginia, Lewis was implicated in a double murder-for-hire plot that led to the death of her husband and stepson. The motive? A hefty insurance payout. Her actions resulted in her becoming the first woman to be executed in Virginia in over a century. For her last meal, Teresa Lewis requested a comforting combination of home-style Southern cooking. She savored the crispy, golden exterior of fried chicken, the simple yet satisfying taste of peas bathed in butter, and the sweet, cinnamon-kissed crust of apple pie. To wash it all down, she had a can of Dr. Pepper, its effervescence adding a pop of fizz to her final feast, an American classic for her final meal. Next, at number 6, is Victor Feguer. Victor Feguer holds a chilling place in history as the last federal inmate executed in the United States before the moratorium on capital punishment in 1972. His crime? The cold-blooded murder of Dr. Edward Bartels in 1960. As his execution date approached in 1963, Feguer made a request for his last meal that was as unique as it was symbolic. Unlike most inmates who opted for hearty meals or favorite dishes, Feguer requested nothing more than a single olive. Yes, you heard it right. A single olive with the pit still in it. His hope that an olive tree, a symbol of peace, would sprout from his grave as a testament to the life he took and the life he lost, a symbolic and unique last meal request. Halfway through the list, at number 5, is Ricky Ray Rector. Rector was convicted for the murder of a police officer in Arkansas in the late 80s. His case drew attention not just for his crime, but for the controversy surrounding his mental competence at the time of his execution. As we delve into the more somber details of his last meal, we find a curious mix of comfort foods. Rector requested a hearty steak, fried chicken and cherry Kool-Aid to wash it down. But the most interesting part of his last meal was the pecan pie. He left it untouched, telling the guards he was saving it for later. A poignant statement, perhaps reflecting his mental state, or a simple misunderstanding of his impending fate. Either way, it added a peculiar ending to his last meal, leaving a haunting memory in the minds of those present. Moving on to number 4, we have Aileen Wuornos. Wuornos, a former sex worker, was convicted of murdering 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. She claimed that her victims had either raped or attempted to rape her while she was servicing them, and that all of the homicides were committed in self-defense. Her story has been widely covered in the media, including in movies, documentaries, and books. For her last meal, Wuornos shied away from the extravagance seen in some of the other meals we've covered. Instead, she opted for a more modest choice, a hamburger and other snacks from the prison's canteen. There were no gourmet dishes, no elaborate requests, just a simple meal from the everyday offerings of the prison's canteen. It seems that in her final hours, Wuornos sought comfort in the familiar rather than indulging in a feast. A simple and straightforward last meal. Coming in at number 3, we have Ted Bundy. Recognized as one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, Bundy's charm and intelligence masked a brutal and deranged mind. He was responsible for the heinous crimes against at least 30 young women and girls during the 1970s. When it came to his last meal before execution in 1989, Bundy declined any special request. As per the Florida State Prison's policy, inmates who do not make a special meal request are given the standard fare, so Bundy's final meal consisted of a medium-rare steak, over-easy eggs, hash browns, slices of toast with butter and jelly, followed by a cold glass of milk and juice. A rather ordinary meal for an extraordinarily notorious man. It's a stark reminder that these criminals, despite their horrific acts, are still human beings facing the end. A standard meal for one of the most notorious serial killers. At number 2, we have John Wayne Gacy. Known as the Killer Clown, Gacy was an infamous American serial killer who was convicted for the heinous murder of 33 young boys and men between 1972 and 1978. His double life as a respected community member and brutal killer shocked the world. Gacy's last meal request was a peculiar combination that reflected his past. Prior to his life of crime, Gacy managed 3 KFC outlets. So his request? 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC, French fries and a pound of strawberries. An interesting mix indeed. The juxtaposition of this seemingly normal meal with the gruesome crimes of its requester is chilling. As he sat down to enjoy what would be his final feast, one can only wonder what was going through his mind. A meal that mirrors his own life before his crimes. And finally, at number 1, we have Timothy McVeigh. A name that sends chills down the spine of many, McVeigh was responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, an act of domestic terrorism that claimed the lives of 168 people, including 19 children. Convicted and sentenced to death, McVeigh was executed in June of 2001. But what did this man, who orchestrated one of the deadliest acts of terrorism on American soil, choose for his last meal? Surprisingly, his request was far from elaborate. McVeigh asked for 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. No lavish spread, no exotic delicacies, just a simple ice cream flavor. Perhaps a childhood favorite or a comfort in those final hours. It's a chilling reminder that behind these notorious crimes are individuals, each with their own stories, choices, and in this case, a simple yet peculiar choice for the final meal. And there you have it, the 10 most notable last meals on death row. From Ronnie Lee Gardner's steak and lobster tail to Timothy McVeigh's simple mint chocolate chip ice cream, these requests offer a glimpse into the human side of individuals who are often viewed through the lens of their crimes. The last meal, a tradition steeped in history and controversy, is a final act of humanity in an otherwise tragic and dire situation. It reminds us that behind every headline, every gruesome detail, there is a person with tastes, preferences, and in some cases, a sense of humor. While it's a topic that can stir deep emotions and provoke thought, it's also a part of the broader conversation about justice, punishment, and humanity. If you found this content intriguing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Until next time.